Okay, so this is quite complicated. We've been asked to have a single BGP4 session on the route reflector, handling both the IP version 4 and the IP version 6. Now, when we take a step back, we realise that the IP version 6 is running completely natively over this cloud, and tunneling the routes is not going to change that, because the IP version 6 is not going down the MPLS, because we're not running 6PE. It really is running natively over the cloud. Now, in a couple of screens' time, we're going to be running version 6 IPv6 shortcuts in ISIS, and we're going to be setting a tunnel up. But at the moment, there's no tunnel. All we're doing is we're using INET 6 unicast. So INET 6 unicast has a couple of characteristics. And the first characteristic is it's going to create these v4 mapped addresses as the source, as the next hop of the route. And so we saw these v4 mapped addresses with these external peers. And we have several external peers using a single BGP4 session. Okay, and we also need to type the family INET 6 unicast on the CBGP between 3 and 5 and 4 and 6. So what happens with these v4 mapped addresses? Well, surprisingly, they effectively disappear, because as we set the next hop on the external peers, then the v4 mapped address, which really will be being used from router 8 towards the route reflector and router 7 towards the route reflector, those v4 mapped addresses, we have to change them, we have to set them. So that next hop self coming in effectively removes the v4 mapped address. Now we have to do the same thing on P1 that comes into router 3 and on the upstream 3 that's coming into router 5. And also we're doing the same thing on the aggregate route that we're advertising from 3 to 5 and 4 to 6. So strangely, those v4 mapped addresses disappear. But of course, we do need to have set system allow v4 mapped address. Okay then, so how about the route reflector? What's it going to need in order for this to work? And surprisingly, it's not going to need anything, because we're in the data plane. The routes are going via the BGP4 session, but there's no resolution with the MPLS. And so the fact that the route reflector is off the MPLS path, in this case, doesn't cause a problem. So how about the INET 6.3? Well, at the moment, there's no requirement for an INET 6.3 or a RIB 6.3 route either. And that's a real surprise, because for once we don't need it. However, if we were to run 6VPE, we would need the IPv6 tunneling command, and as we're not on the MPLS path, we would also need the route at that point. But at this point, the route's not required. So a little bit complicated there. The bottom line is we are using the INET 6 unicast. However, we're keeping the data just purely in the data plane. And with our next hop self-resolutions, most of the impact of the INET 6 unicast disappears. And then finally, remember that we're going to be using these ISIS shortcuts for the IP version 6 between upstream 3 and P1 to keep it away from the customer 1 and customer 2 IPv6.